Morning. This is the time and place for the December meeting of the Board of Oil, Gas, and Mining, the Department of Natural Resources, and for the state of Utah. Before we get started, I need to read this now unfortunate occurrence of why we're having an electronic meeting. I, Chris Hansen, Chairman of the Board of Oil, Gas, and Mining, have determined the December 9, 2020 public meeting will be held electronically and without an anchor location. This determination is based on the following facts. 1, Utah continues to be affected by the COVID-19 global pandemic. 2, as a result of the high level of transmission under the COVID-19 Transmission Index, the Utah Department of Health's State Public, I'll say that again, the Utah Department of Health's State Public Health Order 2020-17, declaring a statewide public health emergency, remains in place for Salt Lake County. 3, the physical space utilized for public use within the Utah DM is insufficient to maintain effective social distancing, and the board is unable to ensure proper safety protocols are in place to guarantee safe protection to the public. 4.
Excuse me.
Sure.
You're cutting out. Let's see. The board is unable to ensure proper safety protocols.
Okay, I'll start there. Is unable to ensure proper safety protocols are in place to guarantee safe participation to the public. Is that working, Michelle?
Yeah, that's a lot better. Thank you.
Number 4, the board has been using an electronic platform allowing interested parties to fully participate while also allowing the public to independently view the public meeting and offer public comment. 5, under the circumstances, the electronic platform currently available is a safer alternative to face-to-face public participation. Number 6, this determination will expire 30 days from today's date. And number 7, the board, division, and the Department of Natural Resources will evaluate the public health and safety conditions existing before the January 2021 public meeting and inform the public as to how that meeting will proceed as soon as possible. Having completed that task, I believe we can start the briefing session, and I will turn this time over to Director John Baza.
Welcome to those who are attending online. To say that a couple of us joined the meeting live today.
There we go. Your mic hasn't been working. So if you start over.
Okay. I didn't quite hear all of that from you, Michelle.
Oh, okay. Everything is good now.
Everything is good now?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to welcome everyone online and those here in the meeting room. A couple of us have decided to attend the meeting in person this morning, which is a change of pace for us. But since we were in the building, we're going to maintain proper social distancing between each other. We'll wear our masks when we're not speaking, but I wanted to proceed with our briefing session this morning. And my name is John Baza. I'm the director of the division. I'll introduce someone else here in the meeting with us this morning as we proceed through the briefing agenda. First item on our list is updates regarding penalties rulemaking. And this is a real short status report because we did move into a formal rulemaking action on this. The board approved that formal rulemaking at the October 28th board meeting. There was a presentation made by one of the division's attorneys. Rule text was considered and discussed at that time, and the board instructed the division to move ahead with the formal rulemaking process. That action was submitted to the Division of Administrative Rules by the end of the month deadline in October, in time for publication in the November 15th State Bulletin. The rulemaking has a 30-day comment period with a deadline for comments on December 15th. What that means is that we're in this window of time where it is important for any parties wanting to make comments on the rulemaking to do so in a written fashion. Following that meeting in October, the division felt it was valuable to have an additional stakeholders engagement meeting to talk about the formal rulemaking action. That was held on November 17th electronically. We solicited additional input from parties to guide any further considerations as we go through this rulemaking process. The current working draft of the rulemaking, including certain edits that were requested through administrative rules and the governor's office review prior to publication on November 15th. We recirculated that working draft back to those stakeholders who were in attendance at the November 17th meeting, and that was done on the 30th of November. The Utah Petroleum Association has submitted written comments on the current draft earlier this week on December 7th. And as I said before, that is appropriate to have those written comments during this 30-day comment window. The division will receive any additional written comment through the end of the comment period on December 15th, and we'll be summarizing all of those comments and reviewing those with the board at its January 27th board meeting. So that's just a real quick update to the board on where we're at. This is not on the formal agenda this month, but it will reappear on the formal agenda at the January 27th board meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions from the board at this point, or we'll move on with the briefing.
Board members, any questions from Director Baza? Seeing none, Director?
Okay, we'll move on then. The next item on our list is an update on orphan wells. This was an outgrowth of a internal staff seminar that we held this last month that reported on the plugging process on a couple of orphan wells. And I thought it would be a good idea to have a similar presentation to the board this morning as part of our briefing. To do that, we have asked our Deputy Director for the Oil and Gas Program, Mr. Bart Kettle, to provide you with that update on orphan wells within the state of Utah. I've got a comment to add at the end of Bart's presentation, but we'll go ahead and turn the time over to Bart at this time and let him walk through his presentation for you.
Thank you, Director Baza. So this is a follow-up to a docket item from the February 2020 hearing, docket number 2020-006, cause number 196-50. And as board members may recall, this involved 2 wells being orphaned from into operating. Hold on one moment, we're having some technical difficulties getting the presentation to go. So being displayed now is, there we go. Being displayed now is a map of the project area. And as you can see from the map, it is in southeastern Utah in a fairly rural part of the state, located in Grand County, just barely south of I-70. These wells are located approximately 40 miles from the closest community. If I could get some assistance going to the next slide. Thank you. And as the board may recall at the time, part of what prompted the hearing was a spill at the well site, and there was no responsible operator to address that spill. There was some good banter about the division being willing to use our pants to prevent a spill at that time. If I could get, looks like there we go. So the spill was reported to the division in February of 2020. Within 2 days, we were able to secure a contract to clean up the spill. The very next day, the spill was stabilized, and within 1 week, the spill had been cleaned up. This was all prior to the board hearing. And then we went before the board at the February hearing, received an order, a signed order in July of 2020, authorizing the forfeiture of the bond and plug and abandonment of the wells. The division awarded a bid in September of 2020 for the wells, and we completed plug and abandonment and reclamation of the site in November of 2020. And just a quick look at what the two well sites look like at the time of reclamation. If I could, I would like to give a special thanks to the staff who made this possible in our program: Dustin Doucette, Josh Payne, Mark Jones, and Mark Gwynn. And would also like to take a moment to acknowledge the Attorney General's Office counsel that contributed both for the board and for the division. And I'd like to take a moment to talk about the Orphan Well program that the division administers. Currently, we're forecasting to plug and abandon 13 wells in 2021. To date, since 1990, the program has plugged 117 wells across the state. And to give the board a little context of what this means, Utah has a relatively small number of orphan wells. The last count we did was 33 wells statewide. That's an order of magnitude smaller than all the surrounding states, where all of them have between several hundred and several thousand orphan wells. So that's something that we're fairly proud of. We've done a good job managing orphan wells over time. But really, the Orphan Well program starts prior to the wells being orphaned in how the program administers the idle wells within the state, that being shut-in wells and temporarily abandoned wells. And over time, in the last 2 decades, the number of wells in the state has increased almost threefold, from just over 6,000 to just over 16,000 currently unplugged wells in the state. Over that same period of time, the number of idle wells in the state has gone from just over 300 wells to hovering in the upper 300s, around 370, 380. With some of the COVID implications, we've crossed over the 400 wells in the state that are idle at this point. But I'd like to give kind of staff some credit for the work they've done to work with operators and get wells either plugged or produced while there's a responsible operator in place, preventing wells from being orphaned in the future. In situations where needed, staffs work diligently with companies to get adequate bonding for wells that are going to be idle for a long period of time. And currently, the program is working on what we think is going to be some pretty innovative data-driven decision modules. It will have a similar error to the inspection prioritization we've shown to the board previously, where data will be tracked and displayed spatially, and it will also have an automated component that will help staff know which wells to look at what time and help them document the items that they're working on. We're also looking forward to finishing the penalty rulemaking Director Baza previously presented on. We view this as being a tool that will help the division protect the interests of the state and of the industry moving forward in regards to orphan wells, and in the future working towards bonding that is sufficient to cover all scenarios regarding wells, and once again helps protect the state and industry from orphan wells. With that, Director Baza, that concludes my presentation. I would open it up to questions.
Are there any questions from the board on that part of it?
I have a question, John, if I may.
Please go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Bart, that really looks good, that reclamation. I want to commend you all for that. Just a question, did the bond sufficiently cover the amount of expense required to reclaim and clean up the problem?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Brown. The bond in this scenario did not adequately cover the expense to plug and abandon the wells and reclaim the well sites. A couple things complicated these wells. One being that there was an existing spill at the site that required some cleanup. Another item being the remote nature of the wells required a fairly significant mob cost to the site. And for only 2 wells, it's hard to spread that across the well bonding.
So just to follow up, I suppose we learn lessons from this when we do bond assessments in the future that might come into play. Is that correct?
Yeah, and maybe to give the board a little context, the division through the idle well program was able to work with this operator to plug 6 of 8 wells. At the time the division was working with the operator, these remaining 2 wells didn't fall under the shut-in temporarily abandoned rules. And so the idle well program was successful in addressing 6 wells. Unfortunately, these 2 didn't fall within it and ended up becoming open.
Thank you for that explanation. That's all I have. I yield back.
So Mr. Brown brings up an excellent question, and this plays into the comments that I wanted to make at this time. So if we look at how orphan wells can be managed in any state regulatory program, and I'm comparing ourselves with other states in the US, I guess the first tier is that we would look at effective implementation of our rules and our actions to get effective bonding in place when operators are doing business in Utah. I think our rules are designed to establish a framework of responsible development. And as long as operators are adhering to those rules and doing things well, I think we avoid the possible liability for an orphan well situation. Frankly, a number of orphan wells that we've seen over the years are legacy problems that have existed for many years that we weren't able to cure because operators were long gone or went forfeit or something like that. But I think an effective regulatory program like we have in Utah is probably the first line of attack. Secondly, we have something a bit unique here in that we have a idle or shut-in well program and rules that are in effect for that. It allows us to have a time for which operators have to address how long wells can sit idle. And obviously, the longer a well sits idle, the more risk there is that maybe it will never return to production. So we do have an effective system in place in Utah, and that's kind of our second line of attack for addressing these potential liabilities. Lastly, since about the early 1990s, we have had the authority to take some of the dollars that come in on our conservation fee and allocate them to an orphan well plugging program. Again, this is designed to address some of these legacy problems, and there's only a small amount of dollars that we can actually allocate each year to that effort. But that fund has built up to the extent where it now can take care of some of these excess liabilities, like in this case, where the reclamation cost more than what we had in available bonding. it can help do that job. So I feel in Utah, we've worked very hard over the years to create a system that keeps these liabilities from becoming a public problem or a public financing problem. The dollars that are being paid into our orphan well fund come from industry fees that are generated through the conservation fee. I also wanted to point out that there is some effort in Congress to try to address assistance to the states, some aid under the CARES funding to allow states to utilize some federal dollars to plug orphan wells in their states. It's something akin to the abandoned well or abandoned mine program that exists through SMACRA and the Office of Surface Mining. But that legislation is not quite ripe yet. I know that Congress is debating even still how to give proper assistance during the pandemic. So that has not reached fruition in Congress. But I think there's some hope that, the federal government will acknowledge that in many states, the orphan well problem is quite large, numbering into the thousands of wells. In Utah, we're fairly fortunate that we've been able to manage it so that our number statewide is probably on the order of 100 to 200 orphan wells. So it's at least a loss of our liability in Utah, but it's something we continue to address progressively. That's really all we had on this topic. Again, we're happy to answer any further questions from the board. And it looks like Mr. Borden has his hand up.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate the overview of the inventory of wells in the state. It's nice to get that, see those numbers every year just to see where we are. I just had a follow-up question to Mr. Brown's. Has the state had any experience plugging and reclaiming long lateral horizontal wells, or is most of this orphan well experience been with vertical wells? And I'm curious about the relative costs of those two. The bonding is about similar in its shortfalls for the two types of wells.
I'll take a first crack at that and then I'll turn it over to Bart. But I believe the horizontal drilling activity in the state is too recent to have entered into any kind of orphan well situation involving horizontal wells. But I know that we have in the past plugged deep vertical wells on the order of 16,000 feet. Those can be quite expensive when you get to that depth. But I'll leave it up to Bart if you want to add anything more to that, Bart.
No, that's correct, Director Baza. To date, the division hasn't had any long horizontal wells that have been part of the orphan well program.
Is there anything that you would anticipate increasing cost, or would it just be, again, just based on the total footage of the well, whatever its orientation? Huh?
I think when we talk about horizontal wells, we'll have to take a close look about how that affects bonding. I think you heard a presentation earlier this year giving you a bonding update and where we were at with our bonding situation. That was in anticipation of entering into a rewrite of our bonding rules. Since then, during the special session in the summer, Senate Bill 6004 was passed, which put a pause on the division's rulemaking that's not required by statute until next July. So in terms of that bonding rule, we do see that probably needs to be updated with some current amounts and current activities like horizontal drilling, but we'll be addressing that at the beginning of the next fiscal year.
Thank you.
I have a question. Any money that's coming from the feds will that be given to the state for state responsibility wells or to help the state plug federal wells? And are you interacting with the BLM in trying to get federal wells plugged also?
You know, the limited language I've seen on that Orphan Well Relief Act, so to speak, it tries to address programs that are managed by state governments and how those would occur. I know that a portion of that money may end up going to the BLM in to administer their programs for orphan wells, but I think the intent is much of that money was going to end up in state hands and allocated to the states for their programs.
Thank you.
Hey, John, if I could maybe answer Rich's question a little bit on the plugging costs for those long horizontals. I could probably add a little more to that.
That would be great, Dustin.
Yeah, so on those,
I want to introduce yourself, Dustin,
oh, yeah,
for the
Dustin
record.
just said, I manage the Orphan Well program. I'm the petroleum engineer for the division. On those long horizontals, typically we wouldn't expect additional costs for the horizontal because we're not plugging necessarily a horizontal lateral portion. We'd just be plugging from basically the point of penetration into that horizontal interval on up. So it wouldn't be much, really wouldn't be any more expensive than what we'd expect from a vertical well to that same horizon. I don't know if that better answers the question or not.
Thank you. That's actually helpful. And I assume the justification for not plugging the horizontal segment is because it's all in the same stratigraphic horizon. So there's no risk of cross-contamination between aquifers and things like that.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Our whole purpose of plugging is to keep the minerals or water, oil, gas, minerals in the formation they originate in. So that would accomplish that. Since it's all in one formation, there wouldn't be a worry about cross contamination. Yeah.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, with the board's permission, I'll move on to the rest of our agenda on the briefing.
Yes, please do, Mr. Director Brazzo.
So just a couple of announcements I wanted to make under other items. As we do each year, we are going to be soliciting nominations for our Environmental Excellence Awards. Those nominations will that solicitation will probably be announced after the first of the year during the first quarter. And so we'll hope to be able to get those nominations back for board consideration and award those Environmental Excellence Awards this year during the May timeframe. So just wanted to keep you informed of that and that you'll probably be seeing additional information as we move forward. Secondly, under other items, I wanted to mention to you that the division is holding a internal service awards meeting. It's a virtual meeting set up for this next Wednesday, the 16th, starting at noon. I will to send any board members the link to that, and you would be able to tie into that virtual meeting. Unfortunately, we like to do these in person during a normal year, but with all of the precautions we're taking right now, it'll simply be an electronic meeting, but you might enjoy seeing some of the division employees receive service awards for things that they've achieved this year. So I'll make that invitation to you, and if you would like that link, I'll make sure to send it out to you. And with that, I think we'll cut our briefing short at this time. There's some other business that needs to be conducted. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn the time back over to you to conclude.
Thank you, Director Baza, and I think we'll take a brief. I believe we will reconvene at 10 a.m. And by the way, if you could send that link to the board members,
I will do so.
I would like to see it, and I think there are several members that would also. So we'll end the briefing session and begin the hearing